Hello and welcome to my second video on how to fly the Flight Sim 2004 default Boeing 737. Today I'm going to cover how to set up and use the autopilot, brief description of what all the bits are as I understand it, and a takeoff using the autopilot and how you would set up the autopilot and use the autopilot after takeoff. Today I'm at Echo Golf Papa Kilo, which is Prestwick Airport in Scotland. So briefly I'll start by going through the autopilot and its various functions. The autopilot, all the parts of the autopilot sit in the same place on the airplane, just below the windscreen there. Tend to be in the same place in all aircraft and sort of like the same layout. First of all, you've got two master switches which at the moment are off. Generally before flying I leave them off because they do funny things to the plane. So the two master switches are auto throttle is the first one, it's in the middle. On autopilot's on the right. Auto throttle works the airspeed indicator part of the autopilot, and the other switch does the rest of the parts of the autopilot. They both work independently of one another, as does the autopilot. You can use any part of the autopilot on its own and have the other part off. Also, you can change the autopilot settings at any time. I'm going to set it up and I'm going to take off, and if you do this on your own you can play about with it and try different settings and different headings and so forth, and descend and climb, and you'll see how it works, probably better than I can show you. Okay, first of all, the approach function. First of all, there's certain aspects of it I'm not going to cover today. The nav I'm going to do in part 2 of the autopilot. I can't squeeze it all in 10 minutes, that's why I'm talking like an express train, but the nav part I'll cover in part 2 of the autopilot. Approach and back course are part of an ILS landing, which I'm not going to cover today, I'll cover in another video. So apart from that, I'm going to just go through all the different functions that you have. Okay, we'll start with course. This is again a kind of to do with navigation. If you look at the compass bottom here, you'll see that as I turn the course, the thing spins round, the cursor, whatever it is, spins round. I'll explain that. It's better to show you that. It's to do with navigation anyway. So that's what that is. Next one is heading. The heading is the way the plane will fly when the autopilot is on and the heading is selected as white. If you look down to the compass again, you'll see the bug, as it's called, moves round. So whatever the bug is set at is what the way the plane will turn. On takeoff, part of my checklist, if you want to add it, if you've done the first video and there's a 6-part checklist before takeoff, the next part of the checklist would be heading bug to runway setting, and I know that in real pilots do this. The reason is when you take off, I turn the autopilot on just immediately after takeoff, and you don't want the plane to suddenly be at maybe 500 feet and suddenly lurch round to the left or the right. So basically, the plane flies straight out runway heading for the first couple of minutes till you get to sort of like a safer altitude. Next one is indicated airspeed. The indicated airspeed is the one that's controlled by the auto throttle master switch. There's two parts to the indicated airspeed and Mach number. Basically, you start off with the indicated airspeed, and at higher levels you go over to Mach number. Maybe at 34,000 feet when you're cruising, you'll change that to Mach number. And what the Mach number is, Mach 1 is the speed of sound, and you'll be cruising at a fraction of a speed of sound, typically 0.82 or 0.83, so that's 83% or 82% of the speed of sound. I'll explain that in the second part when I'm up at higher altitude, but to take off, it's indicated airspeed. Other thing that's associated with indicated airspeed is this, what they call the barber pole in your airspeed indicator. That comes down. The higher up you fly, this slowly comes down. That's your maximum permitted speed. The higher you go, the lower your maximum permitted speed is on your indicated airspeed. Look where it is just now, and we'll have a look at it again when we're at higher altitude. The next one is the altitude. Obviously that's just, you put that in the altitude you want the plane to fly to, and you can set the VSI, the vertical speed, which determines how fast the plane will climb or descend. If it's a minus number, it's descending, it's going to minus number. So if you're descending, that number should be minus. It does that automatically when you're flying and you change the different altitudes. Okay, so that's me run through basically what all these things do very quickly. I'm now going to set it up for a takeoff and do a takeoff and just climb out, and then I'll probably stop. In the second part I'll be at higher altitude and I'll just briefly describe some other aspects of the autopilot. So I'll get ready for takeoff now and just zoom off the runway. So if I take off flaps, a little bit of flaps on, take pause off first might help. That's a bit too much. Just one flap. It's a big long runway here at Prestwick. So that's part of your original check. So the other part you're checking was heading set to runway heading, indicated airspeed below 250 miles, 250 knots. So I put about 230. You're not supposed to go above 250 knots below 10,000 feet. Also, when you take off, if you're at full throttle and you don't throttle back very quickly, the speed climbs very quickly, and if you don't get the landing gear up quickly enough, you can damage it, and the flaps and the landing gear won't go up properly. So it's important that you do that bit first. So I'll do it the order I do it, and it could, if you want, it could be a part of your checklist. Got some fuel on board, not very much, but enough. I think that's me ready to go then. So set up, headings runway heading, altitude 3,600 feet, put that to about 1,000 feet a minute. Flaps is on, so I'm just going to open up the throttle now, run off down the runway, and as I take off I'll just run through the things that I'm going to do. So opening up the throttles now, just using the rudder, which is part of the joystick that I've got. It's a sideways movement on this joystick to keep the lines in the middle of the runway. Just keep an eye on your speed as well. As you get to 80 knots, just push the nose down slightly, and when you get to about 130, here's 120, 130, pull back, and I'm taking off. And you know you're taking off when you see the VSI start to register. So that's me, I'm starting to climb now. So very quickly, gear up, flaps, throttle back slightly manually so that the speed doesn't climb too much. Auto throttle master switch on, indicated speed on, autopilot master switch on, heading selected, altitude selected, yaw damper selected, and that's me, should be flying under automatic pilot. There's the outer markers, which is a navigational beacon for landing. It's an old-fashioned. The yaw damper stops the plane from weaving from side to side. Oops, flaps down. And that's me basically flying with the automatic pilot set. And I think that'll do us for this time. And the next one, as I say, I'll be the autopilot using it at higher altitudes. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. It's been of some use, and I hope you can watch some more as I go by the outer marker, which means I'm 5 miles out in line with the runway. So goodbye.